Well, hello friends, brothers and sisters in the faithing. Those of you who have been following my line of thinking, whether you agree or not, have heard me state that in the day of the eon, being that transition from the present eon in heavens and earth into the new heavens and earth of the impending eon, which encompasses the righteous judgment of the Lord, not all will enter or come into the regency simultaneously, but each according to his own order and ranking. And when we read statements that I am placing on the screen here regarding the not coming into the regency, or among those Paul states will not law accordingly allot the regency of God, means that until such characteristics are corrected, that is, as to why they do not come in, they will not come in until corrected. This is the staff of the straightness of Hebrews 1:8 that I just placed on the screen. And this is the purpose of God's righteous judgment, that measures are taken to correct such behaviors. So understand that the unrighteous ones, who will not law accordingly allot the regency of God among thieves, covetous ones, intoxicated ones, beraters, robberish ones, etc., they will not enter until they become accordingly accomplished. And that which brings such chastening and correction will be God's righteous judgment, which will be through afflictions. This is clearly seen in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 4 and 5. It is the afflictions which we bear which are a showing of the righteous judgment, the righteous crisis of God, into the end that you accordingly be deemed worthy of the regency of God, for which you also suffer. And where some are bearing afflictions and suffering into the entrance among the foremost ones, others will do the same through the great affliction, who will come in among the last ones. Those made brimful, which we talked about in my video series, The Sowing One, and yet others all in between, each according to his own works, where some will be corrected through few beatings, and others many beatings. Luke chapter 12, verses 47 and 48, while others will have to seize the burden of the day, the scorching heat. So when Jesus said, "Not everyone saying to me, Lord, Lord, will come into the regency," Matthew 7:21, this is until they receive correction as being carried through the day of the eon, where the staff of his straightness is the staff of his regency. And the staff of his regency are those who enter the door into the regency to do judging. Not to be judged, but to do judging, according to the term that Peter speaks about in 1 Peter 4:17, where the entrance into the Aeonian regency, 2 Peter 1:11, involves doors. Doors of opportunity that will be open and shut according to various timelines and events. And not only does the Word of God reveal that doors, plural, will be open and then shut, there are also different doors, because the door that leads into the wedding festivities according to the parable of the 10 virgins, Matthew chapter 25, verse 10, is not the same door that leads into the courtyard of the sheep of John chapter 10. And sheep who are in a pasture in a courtyard are not likened to virgins who will be in the bride chamber of wedding feasts. These are different contexts, different doors. And what I want to show you in this video is, again, distinctions where the straight door, the narrow opportunity of Luke 13:24 is not the same timeline as the entrance into the door of the wedding feasts according to the parable of the virgins. And right here I might add that the straight gate that we read about in Matthew chapter 7 verses 13 and 14 must not be confused with the straight door, which I'll touch more on a little later. So the purpose of this video will be to show you that the straight door, the narrow opportunity, is an earlier opportunity from that which will open at midnight. And where some will enter into the wedding feasts, others will enter into the courtyard, because the bride chamber is not located in a pasture, and a courtyard is not a bride chamber. And the wedding festivities are not going to take place in a pasture or in a courtyard, but again, a bridal chamber. Now, that which will result for those who will be locked out of doors will be the cry, "Lord, open to us," or "Lord, Lord, open to us." where the emphatic Lord, Lord must be distinguished from the one-time Lord open to us. And as I've shown in other videos, when comparing side-by-side verses in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the audience of Matthew concerns those who will be involved in later events, as well as less favorable, where, on the other hand, Luke often accounts for an audience involving earlier timelines and more favorable conditions. And these very differences are seen in these statements with the emphatic Lord, Lord open to us in contrast to the Lord open to us, which here all centers around how one builds his house and what it affects when doors begin to open. So here in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, we read, "Not everyone saying to me, Lord, Lord," with the emphatic Lord, "will come into the regency of the heavens." Where again, this does not mean they will never come in, but as I'll show you, these working the lawlessness will come in last, but not before they seize the burden of the day in the scorching heat. So let's consider what these are saying to the Lord. They say, "Did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons? And did many ability powers in your name?" Which are not merely statements, but questions. Did we not do these things in your name? Which answer is obviously no. He said, "I never knew you." And then he will tell them to abscond from me, you working the lawlessness. Not you who worked the lawlessness, but you working the lawlessness, which in fact is the context of Matthew 24, 11, and 12, which events accord with the unveiling of the lawless one in the testifying time. These things have not yet happened. And just as the sons of the Regency will be awakened in the judgment, so will the sons of the evil one. This has to do with resurrections. So what would be the future context of the driving out of demons? Well, the lawless one is Antichrist, whose ability is of Satan, who also will be present in the earthland in the testifying time. Just as the Lord himself will be present according to his parousia, so will the lawless one be unveiled according to his own parousia. This is what we read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. The presence or parousia that's according to the inworking of Satan concerns the lawless one's presence, with every ability and with signs and wonders of falsification. And the abilities here are through the power of Satan, Beelzebul. And these who will be working the lawlessness under the headship of the lawless one, also termed the son of the whole away loosening, are his sons, the sons of the evil one, the darnel. Matthew 13:38, in contrast to the sons of the Regency. So these working the lawlessness according to the mystery of lawlessness, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7, are those who Jesus terms your sons. Jesus said after driving out the demon, "If I drive out the demons by means of Beelzebul, the chief of demons, Satan, by means of whom do your sons drive them out? Therefore, they will be your judges." And then we read, "But if by means of the finger of God, I drive out the demons, consequently the regency of God comes prior to you, because others will have already allotted the regency as coming into it, hence the strait door." And the parable concerning the unclean spirit, when Jesus was driving out the demons and they were accusing him, where the spirit returns with 7 more wicked or evil than itself, has to do with the resurrection, not only of the sons of the Regency, but the sons of the evil one, the darnel, which is yet another parable we could examine in detail. So the many false prophets that will be awakened to errorize many will accord with resurrection orders. And when these sons of the evil one awaken, they will venerate the son of the whole away loosening, the Antichrist, the instead laying one. So let's jump over here now to Luke 6:46 for the time being, where Jesus says, "But what do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not what I say?" Where of course the context of these in Matthew is in that day when they are saying Lord, Lord. Okay, Matthew 7:21. But here in Luke 6:47, he says, "Everyone coming to me and hearing me, my words and doing them," etc. So we see those saying to me and those who are calling me in contrast to in that day and those coming to me. Now here I've also inserted the statement from Luke chapter 13, verse 27, which we're going to discuss a little later, because it contrasts Matthew 7:23. And the significance in relationship to doors is that those in Luke chapter 13 are the ones that are saying, Lord, open to us, where these in Matthew are those who will say, Lord, Lord, open to us. But let's first consider the context of the dwell-building ones, because in Matthew they're likened to either a sober-minded man or a foolish man, which is not stated in Luke. And the sober-minded and the foolish is seen in the parable of the 10 virgins, again, the midnight encounter with the nearing of the bridegroom. So the dots that connect us to the door in the middle of the night are the sober-minded and the foolish. And here where the sober-minded man builds his house on the rock, the foolish on the sand. But this is not what we see here in Luke's account as to how one builds, where in contrast to sand, it's the earth land with no set foundation. And neither does it speak of a sober-minded or foolish man, but a human, anthropos, here in the singular, which speaks of any human, all human beings. And sadly, most all translations do not distinguish between anthropos, which should be translated either human, singular, or humen, plural, and the Greek word ener, which is man, sober-minded man, ener, foolish man, which many translations translate as husband, husbandmen, defining a masculine figure where anthropos defines all human beings, whether one or many. Now, according to the dwell building on the rock, unique to Luke is the shoveling and the deepening, and set the foundation on the rock, where the sober-minded is not said to shovel and have deepened, and neither does it say set, which accords with the shoveling and the deepening, because the sober-minded virgins, when they are awakened to enter the regency of the wedding feasts, they're not entering through the strait door, through the earlier door. They possess little vessels of oil with little brightening lamps. Matthew 25:4. You see, the understanding in the Word of God is vast and deep, and many of the profound revelations concerning mysteries was not revealed until they were revealed through the Apostle Paul, giving those who are diligent in the Word to correctly cut the understanding into the most deep secrets and mysteries into the Word, hence shoveling and deepening, where others may only have very surface knowledge of God's Word. It's the difference between knowledge, gnosis, and on-knowledge, epignosis, sophisticated knowledge, in contrast to general knowledge. Now, next, the context of water here, according to a flood tide, is that of adversity, where we find the one and only occurrence of the Greek noun plamura, translated flood tide, having become where the stream came rending against that house, and yet it was not strong enough to shake it, because it had been ideally dwell-built. And this is the one and only occurrence of this word translated flood tide. However, in Matthew, we read that the rain down dripped, and the streams came, and the winds blew, where in Luke there is no mention of the rain down dripping or winds. Now also notice that in Luke, the one who is not shoveling and deepening his foundation is building on the earth land without a set foundation, where the foolish man of Matthew is building on the sand. And this is very profound in relationship to correctly cutting the word of truth, because the sand is on the verge of the sea. The sand is in relationship to the beach. The earth is inland. And in Matthew, the rain, the stream, and the wind are said to offend against that house where the fall was great. Key words that are very important for our consideration. And as we will see, the fall of those according to the dwell building on the earth land, which became great, is not the same fall of those who will fall into the sea, which fall was great, which fall is the holaway loosening at midnight in that day, which encompasses the fearful and dreadful day of the Lord, the great affliction. And in relationship to the sea, Jesus speaks another parable. He said the regency of the heavens is like a dragnet having been cast into the sea and having led together out from all or every becoming line, which when it was completely filled, they hauled up on the beach, and as ones taking seat, they chose the ideal ones into vessels, but the rotten ones they cast out. And that the regency of God is likened to this demonstrates that these too will allot the regency, which timeline is Cock's voice, the conclusion of the third watch time into the fourth watch time. And here in Mark 6:48, about the fourth watch time is the conclusion of third watch time into the fourth watch time. Where also in Luke 12:38, there is no mention of a fourth watch time according to blissfulness. And it is the fearful and dreadful day of the Lord, which is the context of the sea, the tumultuating sea, the tormenting sea. And the tormentors of Matthew 18:34 here, the all that being indebted will be settled, which is the context of the complete hauling of those on the beach who will be sorted out among the ideal. The ideal being those who will be deemed righteous through this affliction, through the torments. And this is when dishonor will be turned away from Jacob. Those who are dragging along in the dragnet will allot the regency among those who Jesus terms other sheep. John 10:16, where the herdsmen of the other sheep are the sheep who enter the courtyard, which is not the door of the wedding. Where again the timeline is from midnight into Cock's voice, not the origin beginning of the judgment, as the majority of Christians believe. So the blissfulness, according to Luke chapter 12, verse 38, in relationship to the third watch time, from the hours of midnight into Cock's voice, is the same blissfulness that Daniel spoke of in chapter 12, verse 12. And he who reaches to the 1335 days, reaches to the altogether finishing of Hebrews 7:25. Those being the last to allot the regency among the other sheep. Again, my least brothers who will have said, Lord, Lord, open to us. But let's rewind. Let's go to Luke chapter 13, where here in our comparison of how one dwell builds, I included Luke 13:27 in contrast to Matthew 23, according to those that Jesus will speak to concerning those he says are working the lawlessness, where these others are workers of unrighteousness. Which brings us to Luke chapter 13 here. And I'm going to post verses 23 through 30 on the screen here. Where first notice that the learning ones are asking Jesus, are those being saved few? Where his answer is not yes or no, because the answer is more complicated than yes or no. It involves each according to his own order, summed up in verse 30. Perceive. There are last ones who will be foremost ones, and there are foremost ones who will be last. And I'll say this, that those who will enter the strait door will be few, because it involves a wrestle in the faithing. 1 Timothy 6:12 and Jude verse 3. And those who are apostate are not wrestling in the faithing, as we'll talk about here in a moment. And again, this is a straight door, not a straight gate. It is a narrow opportunity. Where in contrast, at midnight, 50% out of 100% will enter. That is when the bridegroom is nearing, not when the watering mighty one of the dwelling is raised up. Verse 25. And as for this term, watering mighty one of the dwelling, I'll place this definition on the screen. You can pause it and read it yourself, where I'll also include all of the occurrences as found in the DABHAR literal translation. Where unlike the occurrence in 2 Peter 2:1 is obvious the Lord, not all of these words speak of the Lord, but others who would oversee a dwelling, a masculine oikos. But what is to be noted here is that the event at midnight when the bridegroom is nearing and the virgins adorn their brightening lamps is not the event when the watering mighty one of the dwelling is raised up, where we read from then on, which then on will lead into the midnight hour, where he does shut the door, where this opportunity will then have passed by. Where here now we see the context of an origin beginning, where these will have taken stand outside, but also perceive that this will be an origin beginning for those who enter. And what might that origin beginning be? In the same relationship as the watering mighty one of the dwelling being raised up. Well, what do we read in 1 Peter 4:17? Since there is a term, a limited time, of the origin beginning of the judgment, the krima, from the dwelling site of God. But if before it begins from you, what is then the finishing of those being incompliant to the well announcement? Well, I don't know what their finishing will be, but their origin beginning will be that they will say, Lord, open to us, where we don't see the emphasized Lord, Lord, as in the context of the foolish virgins, the foolish man who builds on the sand. And the one Lord, in contrast to the emphatic Lord, Lord, is no coincidence. And when you search this phrase, I have not perceived you, you find it only twice. Right here in Matthew 25:12, where half of the virgins enter the door in the middle of the night, and Luke chapter 13, verse 25, where many will not be strong to enter at this narrow opportunity. And not two different doors, but two different opportunities, two different contexts, two different timelines. When the bridegroom came is not when the watering mighty one of the dwelling is raised up. So now let's come back to our comparison where these in Matthew are told to abscond, those working the lawlessness, where these, according to the strait door, are told to stand off, you workers of unrighteousness. Where, let me clarify, working lawlessness is unrighteousness. However, these contexts must be distinguished. And as I stated earlier, the antithesis to Christ is the instead laying one, the human of lawlessness, according to those called his sons, who are working the lawlessness. And these who worship the Antichrist as the Christ, they offend themselves on the stone of offense. We're here the one building on the sand where the rain down drip. We see the rain, the stream, and the wind offend against that house. And this is in relationship to the timeline of the abomination of desolation, also prophesied by Daniel, who of course is the instead laying one. And just as the Lord tells them to abscond from me, those working the lawlessness, will be the same absconding out of Judea when they realize their error into the whole away loosening. So these fleeing are those working the lawlessness, not the workers of unrighteousness. And furthermore, the absconding concerns all having been written. Concerning the prophecy of Isaiah and those being made brimful, which I discussed in my video series, The Sowing One. And more prophetic words through Isaiah that Paul quotes in Romans states, but Isaiah cries for the Israel. So if the numbers of the sons of Israel be as the sand, you see the sand of the sea, those dwell building on the sand. According to the dragnet that will be led together out from every becoming line, which when it was completely filled, they hauled up on the beach. Hence, the under remnant will be saved. And here this word translated under remnant is the one-time occurring Greek hupalema. And in Thayer's lexicon, it is katalema, where kata is from the preposition meaning down or all regardingly, and lipo, to leave or leave behind. And we continue reading, for the Lord will make a reckoning on the earthland, finishing all together and cutting all together, which are the same prune days of Matthew chapter 24, verse 22. And if those days will not be pruned, not as it were, would any flesh be saved, but because of the outchosen ones, those days will be pruned. And how many Christians today place themselves as the outchosen in the context of what we just read, involving events according to a third watch time, where the sheep of the courtyard will be the herdsmen of the other sheep, not the virgins who enter the midnight wedding feasts. Which I hope now will help you understand the context of Romans chapter 11, verses 25 and 26, because Paul says, I do not want you, brothers, to be unknowing in regards to this mystery, lest you be sober-minded by yourselves. A callousness from in part has become to Israel until the completion of the nations has come in. And the completion of the nations will be in the testifying time prior to the saving of all Israel. Not before the origin beginning of the judgment, but before all Israel will be saved, of which the under remnant will be last to allot the regency. And it's at the altogether finishing when the rescuing one will arrive out of Zion. Not at the beginning. No, this is the grand finale. This will encompass the sign of the Son of the Human, coming in the clouds with all his holy angels, which has been termed in Christianity the rapture. But once again, let's back up. Let's rewind. So back here in Luke, let's talk about those working the unrighteousness, who will be refused entry into the earlier strait door, in contrast to those who will be working the lawlessness, according to the mystery of lawlessness. Because there is indeed a prerequisite to the unveiling of the human of lawlessness and his lawless ones, which is the apostasy, where those who are apostate are apostatizing, which is the verb aphistami. And what does Jesus tell those saying, Lord, open to us? Well, he tells them, aphistami, stand off, you working the unrighteousness. And at the time that the Apostle Paul was pre-expectant in the Lord and his parousia, he said, let no one out deceive you by not one manner that it, that being the day of the Lord, has taken stand, unless the apostasy comes before, and the human of lawlessness is unveiled, the son of the whole away loosening. And the fearful and dreadful day of the Lord prophesied is the whole away loosening, according to the midnight shutting of the door. So where he tells those who are building on the sand, abscond from me, those who are building with no set foundation, stand off. And to abscond is to leave hurriedly. Again, the fleeing of Matthew 24:16. And the standing off is not the action of fleeing. So the prerequisite is what we read here. But the Spirit declaredly says that in hysterical terms some will apostatize, the verb, from the faithing, attending to error-rising spirits and to the teachings through demons, with hypocrisy of false worders, those having been cauterized regarding their own conscience. And if you search the word family, the word hysterical here denotes that which is lacking, which demonstrates a great lacking of discernment, because those who are not sober-minded are intoxicated, which Paul contrasts with those who are down resting. 1 Thessalonians 5:7, for those down resting, down rest at night, and those being intoxicated, intoxicate themselves at night. But we as ones being of the day should be sober, and having slipped into the cuirass of faithing, and into the head surround of the expectation of safeguarding. Not the subsistential worries of our eating and drinking and how we will prepare by storing up years of food supply and water and ammunition among the hysterical ones. And the verb translated lack in the Greek is hustareo. The noun translated lacking is hustarema. But here the adjective hustaros is translated hysterical, where I might add this is the one and only occurrence of this word in relationship to these specific terms that have a specific beginning and an end. And notice these terms are plural, and it appears to me that we might be in one of these terms right now, which is becoming obvious in consideration of this whole left-right paradigm that we are now witnessing in the political realms. And on top of that, Paul also speaks of a term, a specific limited time, when they will not bear the teaching being healthy, but according to their own desires, they will heap on for themselves teachers, as ones being tickling them by the hearing, where term here is singular. Where he continues, they will also turn their hearing away from the truth and be twisted out onto myths, where Titus chapter 1 verse 14 specifically mentions Jewish myths, hence the title of my YouTube channel. Hence that what we are witnessing in the Hebrews Roots movement, which according to my perception, all of this is occurring now, and are all characteristics of those who are apostatizing. And remember, a term is a limited time with a beginning and an end, so these terms that Paul is prophesying regarding the future were not according to the days that he was living. They are prophetic. They are prophetic concerning the times that will lead into the origin beginning of the judgment. And I might add that we should not confuse those false prophets that will be awakened with the false worders and false teachers of present. So those who are apostatizing, aphistami, what are they saying when they are refused to enter the strait door? At this time, do they say, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name did drive out demons, and did many ability powers in your name? No, because those are the ones that will be working the lawlessness under the headship of the Antichrist. So these say, we ate in the eye of you and drank, and in our broad streets you taught. Where this eye is singular, it's metaphysical. It's referring to the field of vision of the Lord. Not according to his personal presence, but his metaphysical perception of those who are faithing and those who are apostate. And this eating and drinking is the communion of the body of Christ, the one body, the unified body of which we are to guard the unity of the Spirit, so that who, as it were, eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord as unworthily of the Lord will be liable concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. So where might those be eating and drinking of the cup unworthily? Well, the church. And when I say church, I'm not speaking of the true outcalled, but the organization called the church, the 501c3. The biblical outcalled of God should not be confused with the organizations or the groups that have their own names, who separate themselves from other Christians in a fleshly manner, who profess or like word Jesus Christ to be Lord, while at the same time not doing what he says or not understanding, which brings us to the teaching in the broad streets, which is from the Greek noun plataia, which adjective platus defines something that is broad or wide, roomy. But as for the noun plataia, this defines a street or a public square. And here it's found in the plural, broad streets, identifying locale, locations. The organized church, the mega as well as the smaller organizations, represents the broad way, located in the public eye, in the streets, in the squares, where literally we find among these organizations tens of thousands of sects and factions. And they are not guarding the unity of the faithing and the unity of the knowledge of the Son of God into the accordingly accomplished man. Ephesians 4:13, because the definition of a sect or a faction is that of a division, a denomination. The broad way is the roomy, comfortable way. It's the heaping on for themselves teachers as ones tickling by their hearing, 2 Timothy 4:3. It's opposed to the straight, narrow way, according to the wrestling in the faithing. There is a way that seems straight before the face of a man, but its latter are ways of death. Proverbs 14:12. So the broad points to the majority, but the narrow the minority, where the seats of the majority are those co-having of the milk, of which many of the leaders are nothing more than motivational speakers, keeping their congregations untempted in the word of the righteousness, that they may not offend someone in order to compromise their incomes, of which many are peddling the word of God. 2 Corinthians 2:17. And in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 13, these are called minors. Not because they're young in age, it's because they're immature in the faithing. They have not yet grown into the accordingly accomplished man. But what does Paul write? Well, so that we may be no more minors, surging ones, and being carried about in every wind of the teaching, in the caprice of the human, in cunningness, to the method of the error. So the teaching in the broad way, the broad streets, where the eating and drinking of the body of Christ is unworthily, is a representation of the modern church, the apostate church, which again should not be confused with the biblical outcalled of God, termed the completion of the Christ, the wife, the pillar and settle base of the truth. And believe me, I sympathize with my brothers and sisters who are trapped in these doctrines, in turn causing them not to examine themselves as to whether they are eating and drinking of the cup unworthily according to their actions, according to the working of unrighteousness, which characteristics are vast. And those who continue in the co-having of the milk will not enter the straight door, because they're not wrestling in the faithing. They are not wrestling to enter through such door. However, the good news, the well announcement is that those who will be refused entry, it will be open to them, which is the context of verses such as Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 and Luke chapter 11, verse 9. according to the seeking and knocking into subsequent watch times, that they may become as ones having been girded about, and have their lamps to be made burning, and be like human, being readily receptive to their own Lord, when he should uploosen, going away out of the wedding feasts already in progress, so that as having come and having knocked, they may straightway open to him. Where here specifically we see the first watch time has already passed by. So these instructions here in Luke chapter 12 are speaking of those who will not enter the strait door. And those who may hear the word, "Stand off from me, you workers of unrighteousness," may have to receive many or few beatings. Luke chapter 12 verses 47 and 48, where the remnant will drag along into the all finished. And this is the truth. This is what the Lord is revealing now for those who have eyes to perceive, for those who are bearing the teaching being healthy. And if we are to be among the foremost ones to allot the regency, to come into the regency of God, we have to wrestle in the faithing and examine ourselves as to whether we are eating and drinking of the cup worthily, according to the mystery of well honoring. So brothers, sisters, friends, I hope that these videos are helping you to perceive some of the mysteries concerning the regency of God, as to how we are to correctly cut the word of truth. Because if we are not diligent to correctly cut the word, in light of these things revealed in the mysteries contained within God's word, we are not giving ourselves as standby approved to God, but quite possibly as unapproved, which shame will result among the first who will say, "Lord, open to us." Where those working the unrighteousness is something that I want to expound upon further, of which characteristics of unrighteousness are many among those who are eating and drinking of the cup unworthily. So, God willing, I'll continue this discussion in yet another video. So, until next time, I admonish you to twist yourselves out in regards to the profane, empty chatters and the antithesis of what is falsely named knowledge, which some promise and are non-integrating the faithing. And the grace is with you.